is all good to go. And for people who are joining us on Zoom and LinkedIn and YouTube or anywhere else, if you think that we're live, please make sure that you're introducing yourself in the chat. Let us know what's your name, where you're coming from, and what you're working as, and which part of the country that you're joining us today. We'd love to know a little bit about our audience today. And we're having some amazing panelists and very amazing panel discussion to look forward to. We're going to wait for just 1 to 2 minutes, not more than that. Let people join in, and then I think we'll be good to go. Okay, so guys, I think we have audience waiting on LinkedIn Live. We almost have around like 90 people and it's crossing 100. I think we'll not make them wait more. And I think audience can join in as we start our discussions. So yeah, let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone. Hope you are keeping well and staying safe. This is Hafsa Anjum and I am working as a community executive at Recro, wherein we are working towards building an exclusive community for developers to help you get connected with like-minded people, build your network and grow professionally. So those who don't know about what Recro is, it is a developer-focused platform helping developers to meet the right opportunity by connecting them with fast-growing startups such as CureFit, Udaan, Swiggy, Dunzo, etc. So welcome to Recro Talks again. And today we are having a very, very special edition of Recro Talks. That is our panel discussion. And the topic for today is front-end performance optimization tools and techniques. And we have amazing panelists today. And I'm going to introduce everyone to you. Some of you all, you might have seen them in our previous webinar videos, and some of them are new, but I hope they get the greatest value for your time today, and I'm very excited to get started. First off, we have Devang Sharma. He is a senior software engineer at BMO. He did a fellowship at NASA, senior software developer with almost 5 years of experience. He mentored over 20,000 developers, and he's a top coder open for 2020, 2021, and 2022 World Finalists. Thank you so much, Devang, for joining us. You can just say hi to the audience.
Thanks, Apsa, for the introduction. Hi, guys. Looking forward to an amazing session.
And next up, we have Muskeen Singh. He's a senior software engineer at Microsoft. He's an app score team at Flipkart and comes with 5+ years of experience in building highly scalable and crisp app and websites using React Native. He is known for his deep knowledge of mobile systems and even deeper curiosity into different food cuisines. You can find Muskeen on LinkedIn, and if you share the same curiosity into different food cuisines, he is the man to go with very strong knowledge on coding. So Muskeen, you can just go ahead and say hi to the audience.
Hey everyone, thanks a lot for having me here, Afza, and looking forward to having an amazing discussion with you all.
And next up, we have Bhavya Mehta. He's a senior software engineer and he's working with multiple startups. He's a developer by profession, but explorer at heart, currently working with multiple startups in the blockchain space. He's a problem solving excites him, and building products that helps the world change positively drives him to get up from bed each day. And he also takes a lot of webinars and meetups at school and colleges, and he teaches a lot of students around the blockchain, and you might have seen him teaching about blockchain to a lot of developers and college grads. So Bhavya, you can just go ahead and say hi to the audience.
Hello everyone, thank you Anjum to have me here. I hope I'm able to add value.
Yes, we're very looking forward for that. And next up we have Dikshit Vora. He's a tech lead manager at marketing Tech Solution Private Limited. He's a MERN stack developer and a tech lead, and he's always open to learn new technologies and gain knowledge. And he is one of the community contributor, and he helps a lot of people. And he holds 6+ years of experience. And Dikshit Vora is also the moderator for the session, and he's going to take the session forward from here. And Dikshit, you can just go ahead and say hi to the audience.
Hello guys, welcome to this community, this meet, and I'm pretty much excited to help you guys and show our knowledge, which we have gained through our experience, to all of you guys, and try to solve majority of the questions that we are having. So coming to the first thing, okay, let's start.
1 second, Dikshit. I think before starting diving into the topic, I have a few announcements to make.
Okay.
So you can post the questions in the question section, and we will take up the questions along with the topics that we're going to discuss. And people who are joining us on Zoom, do not forget to post your questions in the Q&A tab on your screen. Do not post that on your chat section, because that's for the informal conversation, and we might miss on your questions, which we would really not look up to. And we'll be rolling out poll in between, so please do answer them, and I'll also roll out a feedback form in between. So let us know what's something that you love the most, and what's something that you learned and are having a takeaway from the session today. Right, and keep your notepad handy, and whatever you're learning from today's panel discussion, post it on your LinkedIn and tag Devang, Dikshit, Bhavya, Muskeen, and me and Recro all together, and we'll be more than happy to see your takeaways and learnings on your post. And people joining in on LinkedIn, do not forget to post your questions in the live chat. We will definitely take up the questions from the people joining us on LinkedIn. And post your questions, and we'll take it along the presentation, and we'll take it along the discussions that we are going to have. Do not shy away from posting any form of question, and we'll be looking up for more exciting questions from the audience. So Dikshit, I guess we can get started. Okay.
So what do you say, good evening or good morning for anyone who are not from here, and we welcome you, all of you guys. So beginning to the basic conversation, this is pretty much simple. We are all into the front-end field, and the main question over here is why the front-end performance optimization is necessary. So we all see any kind of website, and we find out okay, this website is taking too much amount of time, and that makes the user experience very bad. So to reduce that experience, the front-end optimization is necessary. And coming to the other point, according to major statistics which are coming from Amazon, say Google. So what they feel okay, Google is a big company, and Amazon is into pretty much into sales. So they see okay, for every 100 microseconds, they are losing their sales. So for that reason, the performance is much more important. And if you go with the front end, it is like a front screen for any kind of application. And we are able to see there are lots of things. If the user experience is good, then the users would be able to get a very good experience, and then their functionality would be going good. Now coming to other statistics, if a user is coming, say we have seen 40% of user leaves any kind of website if that is low, very much slower, and if it is taking more than three seconds to load up all of the pages. And Muskeen and Bhavya, we all of us has worked into front end, so that okay, to build up any kind of application, we try to make those applications very much faster. To make sure this thing, we use lots of techniques and lots of important things which improvise our application. So coming to the second question, I would be asking Muskeen and Bhavya to share their knowledge upon what are the major performance development insights and afterthoughts which they would be taking up. So Muskeen and Bhavya, can you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to add to that first question as well, right, which is why is web performance even more important? It's not just about things loading faster. Performance also includes things like accessibility, right?
Yeah.
We are reaching out to a larger audience at scale here, and that is part one. The second is, let's say we do reach out, we are accessible, but if your site is not usable, interactive, right, by most of your users, then it does not serve a purpose. And I'm going to paste some links here, but we saw like folks at Pinterest, Tokopedia, and all of these places, they saw huge conversion bumps, hits happening just because they tried to improve their front-end performance, right? So these things are not to be taken lightly. They are of utmost importance for an organization as big as Tokopedia, as well as a small startup who might be just starting off, right? It's equally important. You might just see conversion ratios going up, more users interacting, more in, more time spent, engagement for the user on the app, on the website. So that's where all of this becomes equally important. Bhavya, you want to take the second one? I'll add to that.
Yeah.
So the second one mainly revolves around what are the practices we follow right in the development so that we kind of make the app performant straight up and not have to look at it later. Generally happens other way around with all of us, but there are some things that we have started practicing. So one of the things that we practice, or at least I have practiced in the with the startups or the applications that I've worked with, is we kind of decide what are the targets. So what is the load time we want? What are the routes that are going to be, and where can we break it down? What are the kind of assets that we are going to load? So is it going to be images, videos, etc.? And at what point they should be loading? There's a lot of we straight up try to follow a lot of virtualization, wherein we try to show only what's required in the first load or on the first page. We also we'll be diving deeper into all these topics, but we also take loading things asynchronously or loading only what's required very seriously. There's a lot of amount of effort that's put into making sure there are no unnecessary re-renders, or the state management that we do is to the point. So the simple thing that we try to follow, like in a nutshell, is we review code, but with a perspective or with the glass on our eyes, wherein we say, is it performant also? Can this be written in a better way just to increase the performance by those milliseconds? Because those milliseconds in the end add up and they change a lot of things. So that would be my take, but yeah, I would love Muskin to add.
Yeah. Dikshit, go ahead.
No, Muskin, please continue. Please continue.
No, my take is similar to Bhavya's, where code review is utmost important. I mean, we all try to get things done faster much as possible, but I mean, the faster has two meanings to it: code fast, but also make it faster for the users, right? It has to be fast in both sides. So when you try to make it faster for the users, things you have to give it a lot of thought, right? And development thought as well as review thought.
Reviewing thought, yeah. And there are a few points as well, like if I'm not wrong, Devang would be able to get us a better knowledge on that one. Like, okay, there are things which we think on a very higher note and then we break something. There would be some kind of points like, okay, we thought of this thing, we thought of that thing, and then we break something. And that would be giving us a step back, like go back and just find some other solution and then come on ahead. And that brings to our second question. The next question, that is like of the style guide improvement. So we all of us are doing like CSS and doing like simple styling, but there are few steps which we require to follow for the style improvisation. And Devang would be like able to give us some kind of knowledge for that one, like what kind of style guide we can put into our application, which would improvise our application for a flow or something.
Sure. As I've already mentioned some of the use cases, so I would like to just continue it. Optimization, a very good point said by Muskin. It's not just about reducing the time, it's also about accessibility. So how larger audience you can serve and how quickly you can serve. In terms of reducing the number of server calls, we can use CSS sprites. We can prevent the broken links, or we can reduce the third-party plugins. These are some of the common things which I personally use for my CSS optimization. In addition to that, I have seen a lot of times we have unnecessary custom fonts included. Now that includes a lot of size as well as the time to pick from the server and get back to the client. And that reduces. So we can do preload fonts, we can use subset fonts, or we can convert fonts to the most efficient format as well. That's another part of CSS. And not to forget, when we go for compressing is something that we are going to talk when we go for more optimization techniques. Now we have tools where we can have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript bundles. We can have the larger the files, we can compress it, and so that it reduces the client side load, right? So either you go with Brotli and gzip, which are the most common ones. So these are some common techniques which I go for style formatting. In addition to that, most standard companies, as part of the standard development, they follow BEM model in CSS, which is I personally very recommend, because that is something very useful and a very efficient way of development, including in testing as well.
Yep. And uh, I think so Bhavya would be able to give like a little bit of his knowledge onto style side. Yeah.
Yeah, we follow similar things. On top of that, I would want to add to use the new preloaders or post loaders for CSS, like SCSS or LCSS, anything less loaders, SAS, etc. Just to make sure that you can load only the styling that is required on that particular page or for that particular component versus loading all the styles upfront. There's a bunch of things we also try to do to make sure that we remove all the unused styling or repetitive styling that's there, which can be combined or not required. So there are tools for that as well. Or you can have tools which can, go through your whole styling or all files and give you a subset of what is actually required. If at all you want to use any third-party styling or, like for XYZ purpose, like Devang talked about fonts, using CDN links make a lot more sense than using a particular link from a particular website or something like that. And obviously trying to avoid using third-party tools or third-party libraries for simple components, which come up with a lot of styles and they bloat the app completely. So avoiding things like that kind of changes a lot of things. But yeah, those are the main things mainly that I follow.
That is very much true, Bhavya. Like I used to do the same thing. Like when I used to do like style guiding, like I used to follow some basic pattern. Like okay, we need to follow the standard things, and then we try to do like reduce our styles and move to the CDNs. Like we used to use like accessibility of the CDNs, and which are much more easier to pick from the internet, and it's like much more faster for our application, because sometimes like style guides help us to improvise our speed of our application. Let us move to the another question. Like, and there is a question from our audience as well. Like the question from Abhishek, like he asked for multi-threading concept for in the front end portion, and yeah, that thing we would be carrying up, and I would be also taking up those things, because multi-threading is also a very much important concept for any kind of developer in the front end. And multi-threading helps to improvise the speed in terms of JavaScript, like where you are using like maximum amount of JavaScript to improvise the application. And at that point, like multi-threading helps because you would be having like asynchronous code which would be lying around at different point, and that would be coming to help you, and that would be taking up majority of your function, and it would be improvising the speed. So and I would be very much excited, like Devang would be able to give us some knowledge on that one.
I think we pretty much covered all the concepts. And yes, I agree, multi-threading, either it is a concept which originally originated from the backend side, but a lot of people still confuse whether JavaScript is still single language, single thread, or multi-threaded. And yes, multi-threading is definitely used in client side, and it is most important because when you have to run different processes, you cannot, different processes or different threads, let's put it very precisely. When you're running different threads on the client side, it's not just you apply lazy loading or you apply any kind of prefetching. You're technically loading more than one resource at a time. So you cannot just expect one thread to work upon that. So multi-threaded is always implemented on the client side, and there are always multiple threads which are working to, load your application faster as well as to serve the application faster. It can be prefetching, it can different types of prefetching, link prefetching, or in terms of CDN prefetching as well.
Yep. And there is anything of other than that, like Muskin and Bhavya, you want to share your knowledge?
So I want to add one more thing. Like when I think of JavaScript, it's still single threaded, right? But the browser runtime, which can make sure that multiple processes are running at once, and which is why you have this concept of event loop and everything. So I would definitely recommend whoever asked this question to, have the basics absolutely top notch, because that will help you a lot. not knowing that asynchronous programming is not going to solve everything like what Devang said. But at the same time, we have things like service workers, right? Which run in the background and do a lot of the things without interrupting your main thread. Like if you would have seen, I've worked with Flipkart, so I know how important service workers are for mobile apps, right? Mobile websites, when you're running websites on mobile, those PWAs function because of service workers, and you would do so many things behind the scenes, even without consuming your main worker, right? So those are pretty important to work with. You're looking at push notifications, you're looking at prefetching your JavaScript even before HTML is there, right? So all of that is possible using service workers. So, and that is spread out to all modern browsers today. So, I mean, utilize that, take maximum benefit from that, and make sure your apps are a lot faster.
Okay. And I think so. Abhishek is like having a same question. Like he's getting still a little bit of confusion of using like multi-threading in the client side. But I can say like there are like pretty much good options which would be helping you for like setting up the multi-threading option in terms of JavaScript. And you can we would be finding like few of the links, and we would be sharing with the post as well. So yeah, Abhishek, we would be sharing like few links which would be helping you for the same. Now, coming to another question, we are having like, how do we measure the web virtuals? And Muskin would be able to give us like the brief idea of like what would be the web virtuals and how do we measure those things, and how do we optimize on the basis of that?
Right. So I think any topic about web performance cannot go without discussing about Web Vitals, right? That's how important that tool and that library is by Google. And I personally am a big fan, because before Web Vitals, we used to do it all on our own. Figure out what is CTI, figure out what is FTP, figure out what is FID, and you wouldn't have good ways to do that, right? So as of now, we are all in a very good space. Using libraries like Web Vitals can give you all of those metrics. So when I think of performance, I think of two ways, right? One is lab tests. Like you and I, when we are developing, we run Lighthouse on our browsers and see, okay, how is my local performing, or my dev machine performing, or my setup within my company performing. But are end users seeing the same thing? Because they might be on a 2G network, they might be on a 3G network, they might have flaky internet. So how is it for them? How is the P95 looking for them? How is the average looking for them, right? How do I get on-field answers, right? So for that, Web Vital becomes very essential, where, this is a library that picks up those user numbers, spits out to wherever you want to push, Google Analytics, anywhere you want, and then you can get those numbers. So give me a second, I'll share my screen. Let me know once it's visible. Is it visible?
Yeah, it's loading up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome. So basically, when I think of Web Vitals, and actually Google kind of came up with this idea, it came up in three terms. One is, how fast do you load? How fast do you make the site interactive? And is it visually stable? Right. So there are three metrics that kind of define those terminologies. One is LCP, which is the biggest part of your site. How fast does it load? Generally, it's images or bigger text or something like that. Interactive is, now you're trying to do something. Is it responsive enough? And the stability part is that, okay, are things moving here and there a lot after they are loading? So, I mean, these are the core Web Vitals. And just by using the library, which this link, I'm going to paste this link in the chat as well. Just by using this library, you would be able to get these real user numbers. And then, you can figure out what you want to work on. Do you want to work on the initial load, or the interactiveness, or the visual stability, and then continue to, solve a real user problem? That's my take on it. Happy to share now.
Yeah. So Yeah, that is like a pretty much good idea of like what is happening into Web Vitals. And there was another question for you as well, because like you have done lots of thing into the mobile side. So there is a question from our audience, like do share some uh, optimization form for React Native, as well as considering there is a difference between how React and React Native works. But yeah, this conversation is like pretty much open for optimization, and I would be saying like if you would be able to give us a brief idea of like Muskin, like how do we do in React Native? In React Native, like we are having optimization things, and we can do it over there as well. But what are the options
Right.
which we get over there?
So I think there are two parts to that world. One is the React world and one is the native world. And there's obviously the bridge, how you talk between the React and the native, right? The major bottleneck, if you talk to anybody who's worked in React Native, is the bridge. Native is by itself faster. React, your basic front-end techniques would work. The communication between the two is where a lot of slowness or lag kind of happens. So what we identified at Flipkart is minimal communication, right? Between the two makes a lot of sense, and reusing as much as possible from native into the JavaScript world, right? And that those are the two techniques we built on top of that. Those are like fundas that we lived by. I left the organization, but I still know that they are living by those fundamentals still, right? But I mean, those are the two fundamentals. But I'm happy to discuss more on that as well.
Yeah.
Diksha, just I would like to add one thing here to Muskin's answer. So it's apparently good question, and I was working with Facebook at that time, and I'm an open source contributor to React Native. The biggest trouble that we had in React Native and where Flutter actually took over the market was its compatibility with Android. So we were running very fast applications on iOS, Swift application. They were running fast, very able to integrate the mobile React Native applications. But with the Android, when we have those threads running in the Kotlin or specifically in Java, we're not able to integrate in the bridge. And that was the biggest problem we had. So the version which were released in November 2022, it's all open source. You can read out how we solved it, what was the problem. And those who follow React Native, they would know. React Native team is one of the most efficient and fast development team in Meta. So we used to release every 6 months. You see React versions are rolling out almost every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But that React Native version that was rolled out after 3 years. And the reason it took 3 years is because we tested, we did the performance testing, stress testing, and we fixed that problem. It took us 3 years. We probably lose some market share. I agree to that. But that bridge problem that we were facing for the Android, as well as compatibility, some security enhances as well, but majority complexity with the Android side, that we have fixed. And it's a very good, you go to the React Native website, they are very well described. What was the exact problem? How do we solve it? And what are the performance optimization we have used? State management and all, I won't count this as a new technique, right? Because we have it in the React and we have in the React Native since long. So that is not something which I will count as enhanced measurement or very enhanced performance improvement. But I would highly recommend, I can share the article or you can just Google it. That is definitely going to help you understand how React Native changed its core architecture. They literally changed the core architecture in 3 years and they rolled out the new version, which actually helped us gain back React Native, make super fast application, no matter what is going to be the end client side. You make it web application, mobile application, Android or iOS, anything. I would highly recommend that article to read.
Okay. So I was willing to come to you, Devang, like to get like more and more idea about like how did you work with React and React Native as well. And coming to Pavya, like any kind of knowledge you want to share on this one, because like it seems like you also done like React Native stuff.
I think most of the things are answered, and the problem is there basically, interacting to native things using the bridge, etc. So those are the main problems, and I think they are getting solved. There are a bunch of people who would just recommend go and move to Flutter and don't try to optimize React Native because it's a black space. Sometimes you are so stuck and some things just take up too much time if you don't have native developers like iOS developers or Kotlin developers to help you out. It can be a big black box, especially for startups who are just going ahead with JavaScript developers to optimize such applications. But I hope there is more content around it and we are solving it slowly and steadily.
Yep. And I'm having a question next for you, Pavya. The question is like, what is asynchronous loading, and how do we use aggressively use like lazy loading, and how do we set up like what is the best way to optimize like lazy loading into our application?
Okay, so this is just one technique to optimize your applications. What is asynchronous or lazy loading? So first of all, lazy loading is loading what is required and then lazily loading other things. Or like, for example, I click a button, go to a next page and then loading that page. Or I click on a button which says view and then I load an image, which is then going to be shown. So that is lazy loading, like not loading. Initially, asynchronous loading was like the difference between that and asynchronous loading is for asynchronous loading, you are loading it, but in parallel on a different thread of sorts, wherein your main content is not blocked. And whenever that other part of CSS or JavaScript or your font or anything like those images get loaded, they will come up. So we see today in today's world that you go on any website, for example, Flipkart or Amazon, or say on Upwork, Fiverr, you'll see some boxes which show a loading state. So there is a content getting loaded, but they are showing some kind of information wherein you feel that you can interact with the website. So that is the main goal, wherein the user feels that okay, he's being served some content because he's for that over there. He cannot just see a white blank screen and hope that it gets loaded. So there are all kinds of loading mechanisms that get implemented. Coming to how much should we use it, asynchronous loading I think is fair for everything when it comes to like data or all your assets. You can pretty much use it and there's no problem unless you are a very small application and you are specially putting in effort to optimize your performance when your website is just few KBs. I don't think you need to do that. You can first keep working on building the functionality and the features and then come to getting into the complex stuff. And lazy loading, one practice like we had, or even with other technologies like Next, you would say is load the page, and if there's another route, load it when that person or a person goes on that route. Like that's the easiest way of lazy loading. Like load the first route, and then if you are going to the next route, load that route, and if you're going to the next route, load that route, and slowly keep loading whatever is required. So if a person does not go, like if your application has 10 routes and a person does not go to say 7 routes, then he only sees 3 and there's only that much content. So those are the basic principles, but there are like other complex things that you can implement within the page, which would then delve into virtualization, wherein you just load what is there on the window. Like there is a React window library wherein you just load what is there on the main page, and then when a user scrolls, you load more content or more items or more data, whatever is required. So those would be my take, but I'm happy if you guys can add more.
Yeah. And I'm having a question with all of you guys, like Bhavya, Devang, and Muskin. There is a question, there is an audience question from Sachin. Like he has given a question like, how do we optimize the existing code? Okay, and what should we start with? So it's a simple thing. Like we all of us write like lots of code on a daily basis, and we see our application. Okay, we need to improvise this thing. We need to improvise the functionality. We need to improvise all of the stuff. But how do we start? What was the first step?
I would want to start, like, first answer this only because I did it very recently. So the first thing that I do on any front-end application that I want to optimize is pick up all the assets and run them through a minimizer or a whatever compressor. So all the images and especially PNGs, videos, GIFs, etc., they kind of get reduced at least by 50%, and that enough, like only that much will improve your load times by 20%. There was a study wherein BBC did that for their website and they got a 50% jump in their load times. So there are a bunch of companies that do that. So first is obviously go through all the assets, compress and minimize them. And then the next thing is first measure. Like, where is it going wrong? If you don't know what part of your app is taking more time, what are the calls? So for example, when we were working on one of the applications, I work in the blockchain space. So there was a specific blockchain call that would happen, which would maybe, take 900 milliseconds, 800 milliseconds. And that call was not even required on every load. So if we were not able to track that, like this is what is causing it, then we would have never been able to save those 800 milliseconds. So it is important for you to first then go and measure. We talked about Web Vitals. There are other websites which will help you do that. There are a bunch of inbuilt libraries in React or in JavaScript, which, can help you understand, like a profiler, etc., which will help you which component is getting loaded how many times. And then try to optimize for, first, like whichever will give you the biggest gain. Like if you see one component rendering 100 times and it should be rendered only 2 times, then that is where the problem, like the biggest problem is. And then first go optimize for that and then, keep going. But measuring is the first step for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Devang, like, what would you think? What are your thoughts? Because I'm sure like you're done like with Facebook and with React Native. So I think so you are having like very much good knowledge on like how do we start with this one, with the code
I think Bobby has
optimization.
covered all the points. The very first thing you mentioned that we all write code. There's a very clear difference between writing code and writing good quality code, right?
Yes.
We always say everybody can code, but it's not every time the good quality code. And I agree. The very first step is that you need to analyze where exactly the problem lies, right? Many tools are there. He mentioned about profiler and other things. And with React and React Native, we have inbuilt tools. We have state management libraries for it. We can figure out exactly what time is loading, how many times a particular procedure call or a state management call is being made. So you analyze those numbers, and while you do performance testing, it's not about you made the application, then you understand what's going wrong. No, while you're building the application, you should have some numbers in your mind. That's where system design is important, right? So you figure out this is going to be P95 to P99 latency. And I'm not specifically saying about front end, I'm talking in general app development. You set a benchmark that this is the expected load I'm going to have. This is the expected latency I'm going to have. If things are not working around, what is the exact pinpoint? So you can go by stack trace, you can figure out the exact call where it's required, and then you can apply different tools. And as I agree, the most easiest ways to that, you can go a minimizer that will definitely reduce 40 to 50%. If you are not using CDN, definitely use CDN and caching. That again reduces your images and size capacity by 60 to 70%. That improves your performance times by at least 50%. So these are very basic things, but always the generalizes understanding and pinpointing the problem. You cannot figure out you cannot figure out the exact problem if you just keep on testing or keep on driving performance every component. That's not how the performance works, right? So you have to pinpoint to the exact component or exact problem where it is, and then you have to sort out.
I'm pretty much sure like I would be doing I've done like the same thing, like and I want to know like Muskin, like what would be the size of the application? Saying like there are developers who would be writing like huge application, like for like say there would be a front-end app which is like very much big, okay, say very much near to Mintra's app, okay, and at that point, like if any company is writing those kind of application, then what are their thoughts? Where should they start? Because as we know, like we would be doing the same thing, like optimizing the images and then moving ahead. But there are developers who in the past, they have not done any kind of updates on the optimization, and then they realize, okay, now the application is slow. Now I need to do some changes. What should I do? I think so. I lost the screen.
So there are two parts to it, right? I think in the process.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I think there are two parts to it. One is improving what you have, which is existing, and then not letting bad code get in, right? So the first part is improving what you have, which is, let's say, not as performant. So in that case, profile, figure out what is the low hanging fruit. How can you solve images, assets, caching, compression, minimizer, all of those techniques work, right? And fixing the re-renders, but not letting any new code that gets in and spoiling the overall performance means you need to have good SDLC practices. Like every PR needs to have not just a basic code review, but also an accessibility test, also a performance test, also the vitals that needs to be checked at every PR. And that needs to be done by somebody who's a part of the core team, who's handling the infra for your application, right? So just so nobody gets the liberty to check in bad code, right? It could be you, it could be me, anyone. So that is definitely very much important. I have worked on those practices, and I know that even though they might seem like they're slowing you down, because you might seem like you might want to ship out features faster, but it's better to ship out quality products a little slower but of the best performance and best metrics all the time than giving it an afterthought, like which was also our second question, right? Should it be an afterthought? It should never be an afterthought. It should be a part of your SDLC, right? Your so that is my take on it. Your development life cycle should focus on performance right from day one. Right from day one, every component that you write, like for example, very simple thing of using a pure component, right? It's very small, right? Starting there can help you, compounding it to all components and can improve your performance by a much extent. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and let me tell you guys, like in the past, I was working with a company, and I was working as a Mosaic developer with them, and the problem was like the code was of Node 9 version, like it was way older version, and they have written like all of the things into promises and parallel stuff, promise.parallel, promise.all, and all of those things. And the problem was like there was an API call to a database, okay, and that was causing like for each and every dashboard render, the API was being called for 10 times. And I just pinpointed that point and told him like it's not a good practice to have like this kind of calls. So they told like, okay, why don't you optimize that? And did some optimization technique, like basic thing, like reduce those number of calls, and was able to find out like, okay, improvise complete code structure. So that is also a very much important thing into like writing any kind of code, and to improvise the code quality, and that would be also improvising your optimization and reusing like simple components and the basic ones to reduce like multiple numbers of extra heavy components that can also be helpful to optimize any kind of code. Okay, now coming to another point of like CDN and prefetching. Like I'm having this question for Devang. Like Devang, what are your thoughts on like how to use CDNs and how to use like prefetching to optimize like the performance?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'd like to cover in 2 points. First, clearing what is prefetching, and then I will come to the CDN part. Majority of the developers, they have understanding that when we say prefetching, we just understand by link prefetching. Actually, prefetching is of 3 types. So prefetching means that you are loading certain amount of resources in your website in anticipation that the user that is visiting the website or the application, they're going to use it later, right? So that actually saves them. Just to give an example, you have an app and you have a major big button there, and you're expected that the user is going to click that button, which is expected to take them to a certain link, right? In that case, why don't you load that before, rather than just loading it on the runtime? So prefetching means just you are loading a certain resources because you anticipate the user is going to read that, and when it's going to need that, so rather than loading at the runtime, you are going to reduce it before. Now, prefetching involves of 3 different types, which includes link prefetching, which I just mentioned about. There is DNS prefetching, so where you can have a specific IP address, you can have a DNS lookup beforehand that is going to reduce time, which you are going to have anyways on the runtime. And third one is pre-rendering. Pre-rendering, I think we already discussed in terms of CSS or LCSS or SAS that we can use for. So that is going to pre-render your client-side applications as well as on your websites. So that was about prefetching, and that reduces the latency, both in case of link prefetching, DNS prefetching, and pre-rendering by a lot of time. So that's very helpful for any kind of client-side performance. Second part comes about CDN, and CDN is not just specific to client side. CDN is also used at the backend as well. But coming our topic to a client side, what we use CDN for? CDN is technically used to serve the static content, which is available from your nearest network, right? So let's say they are geographically distributed networks. So let's say you're going to google.com or amazon.com. Now, Google has multiple servers around the world. Amazon has multiple servers around the world. It's common sense that the server nearest to you, if it is serving response. So let's say if you're sitting in New York and there's a server in New York, what's the server back in India? I would not expect the server in India to give me a response and expect it to be faster, which is already there in New York, right? So how do you analyze which server is nearest to you and which server is going to give a response? That responsibility is of CDN, right? So if the user is far from the geographical server, the latency is going to increase. So request load will also impact, and the content serving time will also impact, right? So you find the nearest geographical network to you, and that is where CDN task is involved. And as I mentioned, it is used for loading the static content, which can include HTML pages, JavaScript files, and style sheets, right? And that optimizes your CDN content. Just a number I would like to share. you can easily achieve 40 to 80% savings in the image file size, because majority of the website, when it takes time, right? It takes time because of you're having heavy images or videos or let's say large JavaScript files. And if you provide them via CDN, it becomes much, much faster. So it can definitely increase your efficiency by more than 30 to 35% easily. So that gives you a significant boost in loading speed as well as on the runtime.
Yeah. I'm having a question for the performance optimization for like all of you guys. The question is like pretty simple. If we are doing like prefetching, okay, if we are prefetching, as you told, like we do like prefetching of any kind of button or say any kind of website, when we click we are expecting our user to click upon that. So why will that be affecting our application? And it would be loading, it would be gaining weight to our application or not?
That's a really good question. And whoever has asked this, they should know that there is something called caching on the application side as well as on the server side, right?
Yeah.
So I agree. Let's say a user opened the app. We expect the user to click on a button, but the user closed the app, right? We prefetched it, but the user didn't click on that. But that we can clear from the cache. So I don't think it makes very significant impact, because link prefetching or DNS prefetching, they are not megabytes, right? These are not like very large files, which is going to impact on our performance or on the file size or the app size. Yes, might be few kilobytes, even not the kilobytes to be very precise, it's going to be very bytes. But in worst case, it can go up to kilobytes, and that we can clear in the cache. So in my opinion, I don't think it's going to impact much. I'm happy to hear from other panelists.
Yeah. So Muskin and Bhavya, like, what are your thoughts? Like, how do we do the same thing? Saying like we are having the performance optimization using like prefetching and CDN. Like, what are your thoughts onto that one?
It's definitely helpful, like route-based caching, route-based chunking, right? That definitely is the first step to making sure your pages are chunked, your application is chunked according to routes, and then doing a prefetching on top, understanding the user behavior, that hey, he's going to click on search, he's going to click on cart or click on account. So I might as well prefetch those 3 chunks. Your second question on that, will it add more size? Devang rightly said, right? That's going to be a few kilobytes. And the browsers are intelligent enough to not like for example, if I'm a stupid site and if I prefetch 50 MB, let's say I'm bad that way, I prefetch 50 MB, it will not let me. It will not let me because browser has, let's say, a 200 MB or a 4 GB, depending on how much hard disk you have, specified storage that it can use, and it divides it per domain. So Flipkart.com does not get all the space in your computer to store all of its sizes, right? It gets only 4 MBs, 3 MBs. Make good utilization of that fact, right? Don't overuse it, don't abuse it. But at the same time, every time you release new features, those will keep getting invalidated. So even your caching should have a max age, like cache control headers, in invalidation techniques. So even whatever you store should not be permanent. It's not permanent storage, right? It's not a DB. It's a caching. Yes. Caching should always have an eviction strategy. It should have a max age, right? So that sort of helps.
Just to add to Muskin points, every cache has a TTL, which is time
correct.
to live.
Yeah. Right.
So Bhavya, like, what are your thoughts on this one? So yeah, I think so. You have you're gone saying like, okay, all of the things are covered, but there would be something which you would be able to add, like.
Not really, honestly, but it's there. And like we said, prefetching. So either you want to gain some performance gains by making things readily available for the user, wherein, they want to give an example. He's probably going to click on a button, and as soon as it clicks, it is very snappy, it immediately loads. So that's a huge bonus. Like the customer or the user is delighted that, okay, I got the content so fast and I'm able to interact with this website so quickly. But at the same time, there could be a chance wherein he just exits. So there's a small trade-off, but the general user behavior, if someone comes into the website, is probably to look up some information or do something. And it is very rare that they would just open something by mistake and they would just go away again. So those are the trade-offs. Like sometimes, like you would not want to prefetch everything, but it makes sense for, like, generally if I add something in Amazon and it's in the cart, there is a tendency that I would go to the cart next. I would not want to just go away. So probably something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Muskin, like,
Yeah, I just had a quick thought. I mean, if people are dropping off just by opening, that's a product question. Like, why are people dropping off? I mean, why aren't people clicking something? Why aren't people interacting? That's a product question. I'm going to catch myself as much as I want.
yeah, because that is true. Like, because like you would be, yeah, the company should be always having like, okay, the people are coming to my website but not clicking onto anything.
Yeah,
Why this is
yeah,
happening?
correct, correct.
There should be a complete research been going on at that point.
True, true.
Yes, and there are like audience questions as well. Like right now we are having another question. There is a good one from Rohit. Okay, he's having like a question of like saying, yeah, if I'm creating any kind of website or say any kind of app where I'm using MUI, I need to use the button which is being provided by MUI, or I should be using the MUI libraries button, which would be helping my performance. Saying like I would be using the MUI libraries button which is available, or I should be using the component, I should be creating my own button and taking like few things from MUI.
So if I can answer that first, if you're integrating the library, there is a purpose. There needs to, first the question is, why are you integrating a library? So if you're using Material UI or AntDesign or anything, there is something that you're looking for from that library. So for example, let's say you are using Material UI library just because you want to use this specific toggle button from there, then I would not recommend using the whole library for it. Ideally, the way chunking is done is it will still not load the whole of MUI's library into your application, but that is an added dependency that you'll have to maintain and all that. But generally, people use MUI or AntDesign or any kind of design libraries because they want to completely outsource the design of the application. Like they'll just do the theming. Like I'll change the colors and the spacing and etc. And I'll use all components from MUI across the application. So that's a general tendency, or that's a general practice in the front end world. But if the question is like, if I already have a library and then I use an HTML button, I would recommend no, because you have the button from MUI, which is pretty much styled. You just change the styles here and there and you'll have the final output. Why do you want to have your own button, do all the styling, and then also write a lot of functionality on top of it to do the same thing which is being provided by a library that your asset is using? So yeah.
So yeah, I'm having another question onto that one. Okay, so the same, it's a normal thing, because people might be asking. So if I'm using a React application, okay, I'm creating a React application. I'm installing a library called Material UI. Okay, and I'm using all of the components which have been provided by Material UI, saying like button, toggle, all of those things. But I'm not doing one single thing to improvise my application. That is, I'm not providing the CDN link into my HTML page. Will that affect my performance?
So if it's a dependency, like a dependency in your Webpack or in your application itself, it generally will get loaded up, like it will get bundled with your application itself, like it will be served. So for example, if you're talking about icons, so you can use the MUI library, like the Material UI library, and you can still choose to not use any icons from Material UI and serve all of them through a CDN. So that is still a good practice. But serving Material UI itself from a CDN, because it is going to be bundled as it is, unless you want to do the complex task of not bundling it and then picking up from a CDN, injecting it, and then doing all of that, which is in today's world taken care of by all the Webpacks and bundlers that we have. So I would generally not go that route unless it is a specific issue that I'm facing. So you have to always evaluate, like never overdo anything wherein you get, I don't know, like a 1 millisecond gain.
Yeah.
Does it matter? And what is the cost of, the development cost or the maintenance cost in the long run that you're going to put in to do something which is so complex or so tricky? Yeah. So that is also something that you should ask.
Yeah. Devang, I'm asking like any points?
Yeah, I have something in Hindi that I don't know how much it will appeal to the users, but boon boon se sagar banta hai, but बूंद के पीछे 10 लोग मत लगा दो.
Yeah, that's important thing. That's important
Right?
thing.
I mean, you're saving 10 milliseconds, agree,
Yeah.
but is it costing you so much of a developer time that
Is it
it is
worth?
not worth it?
Yeah.
Right?
Is
So,
it worth?
yeah. So, I mean, the ROI has to be evaluated. Using Material UI is absolutely correct if you are using it the right way, right? And if you want design coherence in your app, your design system is very closer to what MUI provides. Just passing 2 or 3 props here and there is what makes your app look coherent, good, first class. Go do it the right way. But don't just make a component because you have the liberty to make it, right? It's also time that is money, your money as well as company's money that goes behind the scenes, right? So, I mean, and that's my take.
Devang would be
Happy to
having
hear
like another
thoughts.
points onto that one.
I'm just looking for a corresponding idea to be mentioned. I would like to say in software development, we have a very good saying, which is use the principle of KISS, keep it simple and short. The complicated code is not always the best code. If you're able to make things work, and I think Bhavya has already covered all the points. The reason when he has to use the MUI, the reason when you need to go for caching, when you can bundle, when you can unbundle, everything he has mentioned. So nothing to add here. But yes, unnecessarily, if you want to gain something very less, but at the cost of very much, it's not a good trade-off that you can make.
Yeah, there is another question from our viewers. Okay, so here it's a good one between libraries. Okay, how will you decide whether to pick React or Angular if you want to build an application? It's a complete. Sorry, Sandeep, but it's the same thing. You can do with as Muskin said, like bund bund se sagar banta hai. Okay, it depends on that way. And yeah, Devang, any point?
This will create war between Angular and React devs.
It's already been there.
I would say every framework has their own merits and demerits. You have to understand what specifically you are looking for. It's not like I cannot make good application in Angular or I cannot make good application in React. Everything has its own merits and demerits, right?
Yeah.
You need to analyze what kind of application you need. Is it going to be a PW? It's going to be SPA. How much load time you want? What are the components? What are the routes you're seeing? Even Angular has called module federation. So you can make micro frontends in that and micro frontend frameworks, which is exceptionally good, exceptionally fast. I have pretty much worked in React and React Native, but recently I've been working with Angular 14, Angular 16, and their recent versions. And when I was looking through their documentation, they have exceptionally good performance. So I cannot say that, yes, I will be biased towards React because I worked there and I contributed to their code base, but I will not take sides that React is better, Angular is better. I personally believe even you take Vue as well, any particular framework is as good as any other. You need to analyze the use case for your application and how they are going to utilize that.
Couple of points I would want to add there. If you are a business owner taking this decision for your tech stack, there are some other things that you could consider. One is how many resources are available for that particular technology. It would be very enticing to build something on Ruby on Rails right now. For some particular reason, you feel it is great, but you need to evaluate if there are only 100 devs in this world who can code on Ruby on Rails. It's going to be a very difficult task for you to be able to, build something which can last for years because your devs might leave or go away and whatnot. So that is one thing that you should look into the number of resources available. And if you are a newbie who's starting off on, what technology do I learn or work on? Then the simple answer is figure out the number of jobs that are there. Because all these technologies are good. There is no one is better than the other. But at the end of the day, what is being used by the industry is something that you would want to learn first. And they are also similar. Like I'm confident all of us would agree that once you learn React really well, it would not take a lot of time for you to learn Angular or Vue. It is 2-3 days of work. You'll build a basic application and, you can start off from there. So learning something learn something in depth and learn something that is widely accepted when you are entering the market would help you or give you more fruits. And again, I would be biased with React, but
yeah, it's always
yeah.
This is a React panel.
Okay. Now
We
coming
all
to
are components here.
yeah, we all are components. Okay, now there is another question from Sachin. Like, is it okay to use like 10 API calls in an initial load? Saying like if you're loading any kind of say front page, okay, are you expecting to have like 10 API? I would be doing that way.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, all of
Yeah.
you are open. Yeah.
So, I mean, my classic answer to this is it depends, right? It depends on, are those 10 APIs in parallel or are those sequential, right? And if they are in parallel, do you have, what protocol do you have? Do you have HTTP1 or HTTP2? Do you support multiplexing or not? Because if they are HTTP2 calls, the browser will not break a sweat in making those 10 calls right away. If they are HTTP1, as of now, how much ever I know, Chrome will make only 6 of them, wait for one of them to get resolved, then queue up the another, then queue up the another, and then queue up the another, right? If those 10 becomes 20 tomorrow, you might see very significant delays, right? So it depends. And are those fast enough? Like, are those smaller calls, millisecond calls, which can be cached for the subsequent loads? Sure, why not? But also at the same time, evaluate and see if they can be clubbed together and you can effectively reduce, right? It shouldn't be like 10 hai to ab karunga hi nahi, right? It's better to have something than to not have anything. So optimize that part. But if you still see that there is a chance of optimization by clubbing them, then sure, let's go for that.
Yes, Devang and Bhavya, like, what are your thoughts?
I think Muskan has covered everything. Just one thing to add to the API calls. Also check one thing, are this the same 10 API calls you are making or different 10 API calls you are making? That is also a very important thing to check, right? And I totally agree. If you have to run in parallel, definitely run in parallel, right? So it doesn't need to be sequential calls all the time if they're serving different purposes. It makes sense to run it in parallel calls. And second thing is, as you rightly mentioned, you club them together and optimize it. Why not? And if you still have to do it, despite of all your analysis, you still have to do it. Go with the HTTP protocols. Now we have Web3 on the rise, so we have further improvements we can see for. So go with those specific protocols if you're sure, or you cannot come up to it's a bottleneck for you, right? Then if you have to make 10 calls, then you have to make, right? Then you can improve on other parts, which protocol to use, how to reduce the time, and all other things, caching certain things, those part you can do.
And for the point like that you're given, like there is a point which was I was expecting to get from Bhavya as well, like Web3. Okay, so what are like Web3 protocols, Bhavya?
So Web3 is slightly different. The way it works is we are talking to blockchain from our, so blockchain becomes our, what do you say, the database, and the Web3 library is like the bridge or the backend that or integrating layer between the front end and between the client and the blockchain, wherein you get the data from. It is way faster, no doubt, because the calls happen in a different way, etc. But that's a different thing to discuss. Coming to the 10 API calls, if it is someone like those API calls are to your backend server, I would first catch hold of the backend guy and ask, what's going on, bro? Why do I need to fetch 10 different things? Or like, why is it in the first place you come to a scenario wherein you need to call 10 different URLs to get data, so just for the first page load? But
yeah, I'm having a point. I'm having a question for that one as well, because in the past application where I was working, as I told, so there was a first dashboard API call which was been done, and the data they were sending was of like say 10 or 5 MB. Okay, what should be the perfect size of data in terms of our application? Like, we should be making the optimization much more cleaner. It would be like the question would be for all of you guys, much more faster for our application. Saying if I'm sending an API call, okay, from the backend to the front end, what should be the size of that response?
Size of that response, when we say size, I mean the network size, right? The payload size. The
payload size, yeah, payload size.
Packet size, right? So anything more than 100 KBs is something I would really evaluate, and see what, like for example, there's a reason GraphQL came, right?
Yeah.
It's because the responses were driven by backends, and the front end used to pick bits and pieces and then run. Now, what GraphQL would help is only requesting the bits that I need. So does that help your use case? Then, or reduce the time? Then sure, that could be one way to look at it, right? Or the other way to look at it is, like, I think in one discussion we had something called as React window, where during virtualization, right? Why are you fetching the entire list or the entire page at once if you're fetching 500 kbs or 1 MB? Why not 50 kbs, show whatever is in the viewport, and then whenever the user scrolls, interacts, or prefetch, do all of those techniques, which are pretty much standard in the community these days, right? Use them and then get more 100 kbs or 200 or 5 MBs, whatever you need at the end of the day, right? But your APIs need to be broken down. It's not like you give everything all at once and then the app is running in offline mode, right? Yeah.
So there might be some kind of trouble, like it would be a problem for an API to come up from a distance, like saying, like, if the server is at some distant point and then you are getting like your response, the first API call, it's a dashboard call, and you are getting like huge amount of data. It would be taking some time to load up the data. And there might be some parallel calls which are going into the backend, and that would be breaking the application, the API call.
Right. So I have kind of identified that when you look at the waterfall model in the Chrome network tab, right?
Yeah.
You get to see that, was it the time that it took to download? Was it the time that the server took to respond? Or was it the time you took to reach the server, right? There are the 3 steps to it.
Yeah.
Did you take time reaching? Did the take server time responding? And then you need to take time downloading, right? If your packet size is huge, you would take time downloading, but the server would respond immediately. But if the server is taking a lot of time, then it means there's a lot of processing that is happening on the server, which can be broken down. You could make batch calls. You could make smaller calls and aggregate them, right? So all of those techniques is look at the waterfall model, profile it, see what are the chances that you can optimize. There is something called as, I think, server response header, server response time header, which the server can send, right? Which will help you evaluate what is going on behind the scenes. And that will actually give you a lot of insight into how are my servers doing today. So that can possibly help.
Okay. Now coming to another question. There is a question from Qatar. Like, okay, it's our audience questions, and I have a question about like tool like Storybook JS and Bit.js. Will it be better to better or including those types of tool into big project? So the question is like simple, like, is it necessary to use Storybook or Bit.js into any kind of application, which is like React or Angular, to use those into a big project?
Okay, so I'll answer at least for Storybook, and I'm assuming the other one is Vite, VITE, if I'm spelling it correctly. Yeah. So that's a bundler. So that's a new bundler coming up, and it's like people are using it from at least what I know. We recently tried it out. It's good. Coming to Storybook, so if you have a big dev team, and if you have people coming and going, or like a company like Flipkart, Walmart, Google, they would want to have their design system and a Storybook. Storybook, in a nutshell, is basically everything that you have, a demo of that. So on one link, you'll have all the components, what are the different variant of the components, what happens on the click, what are the parameters that you have to send, what is the output that you could expect. You can tweak the parameters, change the color, see, and basically get the code for the version that you really want to use. So for example, I want to use a button, which is say danger or in a red color with a small size. Then I click on those things over there, and a small code will get generated, and I can pick that up and directly put. So it serves 2 purposes. One is for every new developer or everyone in the team, people are aware like what we have actually already built. It should not happen that I build a component and then someone else is working on a similar thing and they also end up building the same component or a slightly different version of that component. And then we have 2 pieces of code which are almost similar in the application. So that can be like those kind of scenarios can be saved by using the Storybook. Storybook in itself requires a lot of time for like to set it up, to make it run, to keep it updated and all of that. And with newer versions, there is like, it's one more thing that you need to maintain. Like if you update your React version, there is a high chance that your Storybook will start breaking.
Yeah.
So, you need to update that and etc. So what's the cost that you put in for this? Like if I had 3 developers, I would not ideally go the Storybook route unless I want to have the external world see what components we have already built, like an open source application. But within an internal team of 2-3 people, I would never go ahead and build a Storybook. There's a lot of work probably on our plates that we need to first complete and then go ahead and build Storybook in future if required. So that would be my short answer. It's not really required, but it's a good to have if, in those particular scenario wherein your team is big or there are multiple people going in and coming out all the time.
Yeah. And Storybook is a concept like when you are having like micro front end things, and you are having like a similar kind of buttons and components which you would be using onto say 3 different points, 3 different repos of say React.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah.
That
so if you
point,
have
like
a component
Storybook,
library,
yeah,
it makes more sense to have a Storybook because there's one component library which is serving, 10 different UI applications in your organization. Or if you are a service-based company, 10 different projects in your organization, then that component library having the Storybook again makes sense for sure.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts, Devang? Like, because in React and React Native world, I'm sure like the Storybook is like a crazy thing.
I think he rightly mentioned when you're using with a large component, that's where it used to make sense. But apart from that, if your application is small and it's not using very large number of components or components which are rendering a very large portion, it's not even required useful for there. I would like to add one point for the last question. So I was remembering when Muskin has mentioned all the points, but just one thing. I think there were 2 parts of the question. First is like, what should be the data packet size a server side should send to the client side? I don't think there's any specific or any predefined size that you should be careful about, but anything which crosses 200 KB, in my opinion, should be under scrutiny. And the ways to optimize are so many. Again, I might be biased towards React, but I'll talk about generic techniques as well as what we use in React and React Native. And one of the best examples you can see is in Facebook as well as in Amazon. You go to Amazon, you type shoes, you will find millions of results, right? So every time you're getting millions of results, and they're definitely going to cross 5 MB or 10 MB. How does Amazon serve it so quickly? They use pagination, right? Every page they just loads whatever 100 KB, 200 KB. You go to next page, again next page, again next page. So every time those 100, 200 KBs are rendered, and those 5 MB which you are actually expecting, this is not sent all at once. It just goes via paginated responses. That is one technique. Second technique, which Facebook implemented in 2018, because if you remember Facebook before 2018, it was not an infinite scroll. Now after 2018, it is infinite scroll. So what they have technically done, they have removed the concept of pagination and they've introduced a concept of windowing. Now, what is windowing in React? Whatever window a user is seeing, only that portion you have to render. So when you say infinite scroll, at one time, you're not seeing the entire scroll, right? You're seeing one portion of the screen. Only that part is rendered, and so on and so forth. Instagram, till yet, they have not made the infinite scroll, because after a certain time, when you have gone through all the feeds, they tell you that you have finished the views, right? Or you have finished all number of posts. So it's not infinite scroll. But one thing, if you observe at Instagram, only the screen that you're viewing, that is rendered. So that concept, and I believe everybody would know that Instagram is also built in React Native. It was not originally built, but when it was acquired by Facebook, it was converted into React Native, and still it's a monolithic app. So again, I don't want to go into debate of microservice monolithic. So very super fast applications serving over almost 3 billion. We have 2.8 billion daily active users. So even with that scale, it's able to give such a quick response using React virtualized, React Windows, and Viewport. So these features are something very relevant. And even though you have a very large size coming from the server, you can break it down into chunks. And there are many techniques you can apply at the client side. So your application is still faster and you're able to serve the responses without reducing the quality of it.
Okay. So I'm having like a small question for all of you 3 guys. Okay. The question is like, which one is better, the server side rendering or the client side rendering? Because we all are coming from like React Native and React background. So, and the next JS have come up like, and there are like lots of things which are going on with that. So I want to know like, which is better? What are your thoughts? starting with Devang and Muskin, like, yeah, Muskin, like,
Yeah. So when it comes to server-side rendering, right? I mean, if you're wanting to show something to the user as quickly as possible, and that content is relevant, right? I don't want to show a spinner as quickly as possible to the user and then make him wait 10 seconds to fetch the list. If you can at your server render that quickly, at least the first fold, show it to the user as quickly as possible. Sure, by all means, go ahead and do that. But then what about interactivity after that, right? When you're going to scroll, when you're doing animations, when you're adding event listeners and all of that. At that point, I think you have to hydrate, like what React does with hydration, right? It hydrates the server side HTML output and then adds event listeners and whatnot to it, right? So that is, I think, the best of the lot. But if your site is something like a blog post, right? If your site is something like a very static in nature, then you don't need very much interactions, right? They're just simple on clicks that are doing anchor tags, which are doing clicks, and buttons that are doing clicks. You don't even need client side hydration at all. But if your sites are very dynamic in nature, you might have a lot of animations, you might have a lot of video plays and whatnot that you're doing in complex sites like Amazon, Flipkart that I've seen, right? That is where you need the hydration concept, and you need a bit and mix of both. That's what I've understood of how static site generation, SSG and SSRs and CSRs differ, right? There are use cases where each of them kind of work, and you can't just have Flipkart do static site generation, right?
it would be troublesome.
Yeah, that can't work. Yeah.
Okay. So Bhavya and Devang, like, what are your thoughts?
So if I can add, there is one point that generally we should consider while server-side rendering or client-side rendering. Generally, for all web applications, unless, it's a kind of a static website like Muskin mentioned, you would go for CSR. But there is one more use case which is very specific to SEOs and the way Google indexes things. So in those scenarios, if you are building something which is very specific to SEOs, like your blog running or a Substack, wherein it's all SEO based traffic that you're going to get, Google would be able to index all of it better if it is an SSR, which is server-side rendering. So in those scenarios also, you might want to just tip over to using Next.js or something which does that. But now even React has it. But anyway, like you would generally go with Next. But in other scenarios, mostly it's going to be the first load probably can be, like can be served from the server to make it faster. But apart from that, all the actions either will cause a lot of trouble using Next or something like that, or else you'll have to do more management when it comes to specific routes, etc. In those scenarios, React generally would be easier to manage and also perform better.
Okay, Devang, and any
Bhavya has already mentioned which I was going to mention. So I think Muskan has very precisely summarized. You go for client-side rendering for very highly interactive applications, right? But if your application is not highly interactive or moderately interactive, let's put it that way, then server-side rendering makes sense, as well as it is going to be efficient for your SEO purposes. So these 2 points. And there's a reason why Next.js was developed in the first way. Yeah, React has also introduced it, but there's a reason that Next.js was developed to introduce deal with such complexities.
Okay, so there is a single question left from our side, like what are the best way to optimize application by using state management library in frameworks? So all of you are open, like Bhavya, what would be your thoughts for that one?
State management libraries, especially in the modern age, tools or libraries that we use like React or Angular or Vue.js is extremely important. How you write your states, when what is getting updated, what is put inside use effect, or at what point can you batch state updates, like use the use reducer or use libraries like Redux, System, etc. Those are important calls that you need to take when you start writing the application. They are extremely important because there is a lot of leakage that happens in these things. If a state is like, if you have a variable which does not really need to be in the state, wherein you don't need to re-render the whole page, then can you make it a ref? Can you make it a normal variable? That will save you one render, and that one render can end up saving a lot of free renders in the child components, because of parent renders, it might propagate to all the children. And then you are sitting on a button thinking, oh, I clicked that button, but why did this button get re-rendered? But because it was a child of some other parent and both have the same parent, all of it, kind of went wrong. So that is one thing wherein, I would want to be very cautious and be very frugal in a way wherein, at what time do I update states? And is it really required? And only have limited state variables. The second thing that I would also want to add is something that we take care of a lot is, where is that state declared or, maintained? At what level? Like, is it in the child, or is it in the parent, or is it in the super parent, or is it at app level? Where do you keep that? Is it getting propagated? Can I avoid to, keep it, like, can I make it one level down? Because generally the parent would affect the child in React. It won't have happen the other way around. So unless, you are having a callback. So those things are very critical. Like, you need to be very critical of, and every time there are code changes specifically related to states or hooks in your application, they need to be reviewed correctly. You need your developers to be sure that, or be very cautious that, okay, this is what they are getting into, or this is what they are doing. And if it makes sense, only then go ahead and merge that. So that would be my 2 cents about state management.
And Devang and Muskin, what are your thoughts? Because state management is pretty much the thing for any kind of application which we would be thinking.
Yep. I would like to add 2 things here, starting specifically with how state management is important, especially in React or any framework for that matter. You need to understand that the component lifecycle is the bread and butter of React, right? And pretty much any framework. So the state lies exactly at its heart. And when we say stateful data, it comes with performance cost, it comes with maintainability, and it comes with render lifecycle. So just because you write in React doesn't mean that every variable should live in the React state. You need to understand what are the different types of state, where you are storing it and where you're accessing it. Does it need to be a local state? Does it need to be a hook? Does it need to be a lifted state, or a context, or a global state, or fetch data? Based upon that, you need to identify. Just because you're storing a variable doesn't mean you're going to store it in a state. Whether it actually needs to be stored in a state, what kind of state it needs to be. Does it need to be called multiple times? Should it be better to make it as a hook rather than keeping it as a local or a global state? And then how are you going to render it? All of these factors are going to determine your state life cycle. And that's exactly what determines the performance of your application. So these are my 2 bits.
Yep. And Muskin, it's
I can't add anything to what Devang said. I mean, that's superbly said.
because I'm also sure, I'm also having no any kind of extra ideas or any points to be added into in terms of state management, because these 2 guys have done all of the things which we required. Okay.
Yeah, I just have one point that has, I mean, you be on Twitter, you be on these forums, right? There's some sort of FOMO that everybody's trying this new state library. Let me try that, right? I mean, don't fall for that trap. If it works for your system to have just React context, use that and be happy with that thought.
Yeah.
Just don't try X state machines just because they exist and somebody else is using it, right? Simple applications, even complex applications. You've seen Kenzie Dodds, they're pretty much good blog post saying that even you go to a medium size organization, they don't need anything beyond the React context, right? So
yeah,
I mean, don't just do it just because there exist so many options out there. Figure out what works for you and stick to that. Unless you really have a compelling use case of why do I want to use something which is so complex to begin with, and then will take so hard time for developers to onboard and then figure out more on top, right? So that's just one thing that I wanted to add on top.
Yeah, and there is one more thing which I want to add. In the past, where I was working with a firm, so there we were not using any kind of state management library, not even a single thing. But we were using prop drilling in on a proper manner. That was helping us all of the thing. That was solving all of our problems, and all of the things were being maintained by that thing only. By using a prop drilling on a proper, then it's good enough for you to maintain all of the things.
Yeah, I mean, React has come to a point where it's there's a thin line between a library and a framework,
Yeah.
and React is on that thin line. I mean, if you start using context and all of these things effectively, it very well becomes a framework.
Yeah.
You don't even need a full-blown Next.js working on top, right? So, I mean, if you're okay using just React and using all of its capabilities, you might just get a full application out of it.
Hmm. Okay. So those were the questions, like, and if you are having like any of the other questions, like any of the other points to make, like Muskin, Bhavya, Devang, anything.
I think it was a great session, and we had some amazing questions to answer with from the. And
Yeah.
thanks people joining from Qatar as well. I was not
Yeah.
expecting people from
Yeah.
very different countries. So
Yeah,
it's a very, very helpful session.
I think there is one question.
I think there's one question that we missed, guys.
Which
Yeah.
one?
So Muskan is asking, is it good to use the third-party libraries for icons? Example
Oh.
front, also more keep the download assets, head end just to show those will be better. I mean, the third-party font will take more time, right? And
Then why are we using
why
those?
we are using them? Yeah.
So to quickly answer it, it is completely okay to use the third-party libraries. Why do we use them? Because your designer wants to be creative, or your application needs to look more beautiful. So you want to use a particular font, which will, probably delight your users and users more. So in that scenario, obviously, it's okay to use that. There are no two doubts. Using CDN links is the go-to. It won't impact a lot generally, unless it's a huge application and you have 10 different fonts. That's a straight no. But if you have one external font, I think you should be good. Icons, again, if you like using assets or icons from other libraries, again, helps a lot. Why? Because you don't need an internal designer who needs to, build all those icons. There are beautiful libraries out there which serve for all icons like download, save, copy, etc. that are normal to any web application. So all these libraries also have a very minimized version of these icons, so you should be good. You should not import everything into your application, just load what is required, and you should be good to go ahead to use them.
Yeah, we have one more question, guys, and that is from anonymous attendee, and he says, wanted to create form error handling with the help of context, but don't know how to start with. Any suggestions? Devang, any suggestions?
Yeah.
You want to make with context. I'm just thinking, why do you start with context for if you have to make for form handling? So I cannot see the question. Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is like for the error handling, Devang, like when we
Yep.
do like when we put like any kind of if condition for the errors, saying like if there is an API response which would be giving us an error, and then we could give a error handler over there.
Okay.
But for the state management with the state management and context, how would you do?
With use context, you can put actually conditional formatting there. So if you want to say, let's say in if conditions, you want to render a particular component or call a particular state, and in the else case, you want to call for something else, use context provide you with that. In addition to that, you can pass the state for it. Let's say you're capturing some data from the form and expect it to be transferred to other route or child component, whatever. So that you can pass via use context. Feel free to add other panelists.
Yeah, that was the only thing. Muskin and Bhavya, like any points onto that one?
For me, I've always used an external library for forms. Formic, I think, does a very good job of doing error handling and handling all of our use cases. It's built on top of Material UI. So I have personally, I relate so much to that question because forms are a very typical and very error-prone use case, right? So I trust external libraries to do very well, and I don't trust my own abilities to do very well on that. So that's my take on it. But I guess the internal React default tools also work well if you are a much more experienced guy.
I think adding to that, Muskin, we have a specific question for you. I think it's from a speaker from YouTube Live. And he says, considering Muskin is a React Native developer, would you pitch for Flutter regarding optimization? Did we take this?
Controversy, I love it. Again, it's a biased panel, right? To be very honest, I've only used React Native. It's not like I've used Flutter a lot. I've just started Flutter like a couple of times, bootstrapping some of the things just to see how it works. I think the learning curve for someone who's a web dev already to come to React Native is a lot lighter. So you can very quickly become an app developer if you're already a web developer, and then the horizon sort of expands very much. But if you are a mobile developer already who's used to Java, Kotlin, learning a new language like Dart wouldn't be that much of a problem. But if you're coming from web development, starting off with Dart, it might seem overwhelming. It seemed a little bit overwhelming to me initially. So that's my take on it. But from a performance point of view, I think both of them are equal. One of them might have an edge in one specific use case or one specific scenario, or one specific operating system, like Android for Flutter and iOS for React Native or that sort. But otherwise, you can't go wrong if you pick either of them. If you write good code, I mean, it's going to work. That's what I think.
Okay, so one last question, guys, and after that, I think we're done with this session. Well, this session has extended more than what we expected because of audience questions and amazing discussion. So yeah, one last question. And he says, really good session. I'd loved everyone who was speaking on the panel. And the question is, in React frontend, does processes run concurrently at asynchronous only, or under the hood, are there any techniques to run parallel processes?
Devang would be able to give a better answer onto that one.
I would give at the end because I would like to hear from other speakers first. And I think this is a very common question, so I expect it to. But okay, I will just give the answer at the end because it's a very good question and a very controversial question for React too.
Yeah. I'll quickly answer what I think. So there's a language and then there's a runtime, right? So JavaScript has only one thread, runs on that, even though you might write promises and you feel like it's asynchronous. There are multiple threads getting spawned on multiple threads. It's the browser that is spawning multiple threads for you, right? So the runtime matters a lot. Whether you're running Node.js, in which case Node is the runtime, or you're running on the client side, in which case browser is the runtime. There are multiple processes running. So your browser at the backend, behind the scenes, is doing local storage. Maybe if you're running service workers, doing workers at the backend, push notifications, certificate verification, whatnot, right? So many things it's doing behind the scenes. So yes, there's a lot happening behind the scenes that browsers kind of hide from you. So you write your code, but browsers work behind the scenes. What you as developers have access to are web APIs that let you control those async behaviors, like set timeouts, promises, post messages to different workers, right? So that kind of capability you always have to talk between different threads or different workers. But yes, I mean, to answer that question, yes, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And yes, as developers, we do have little control over which worker to use when, which thread to use when. So that's what I understood from the question.
Yeah, Bhavya, how about you? Yes.
I think Muskan added everything. There's not a lot that I would add. So JavaScript in general is synchronous, but browser APIs, etc., help it to make it asynchronous. And then you can, it's like saying, like you're eating something and you just tell someone, go get this, and till that is getting done, you keep having something else, whatever is there, and keep going ahead, and then that comes, and then you then have that also. So basically, whenever that output is ready, you can do next set of tasks on that, like whatever output or result that you were waiting for. So in a bit, it is that how much control you have is debatable. It depends on a lot of your skills and what you exactly like. For example, a lot of applications would never use service workers, but service workers are very powerful. They can do a lot of things for you. So at what point you use what and where do you invest your time in depends on case-to-case basis and your expertise and your whether your application needs it. But in general, it is okay for you to just understand JavaScript and its event cycle and its event loop. And if you can manage that well, I think you'll be able to make everything run in parallel of sorts. At least you'll feel that, and it will work pretty smoothly.
Yes, Devang, how about you?
Now I'd like to finalize two things, because this is a very common question which I am surprised that still people ask question, can you run multiple threads in JavaScript? And then the question related to React. Let's start first with JavaScript. Yes, JavaScript is asynchronous, it's single threaded code. But there is a concept of event loop. What is event loop? How are you able to run multiple threads in JavaScript? How browser enables to assemble it? Now I can talk for hours and hours of it, but that's not going to help it here. But just to tell you, just read about event loop in JavaScript to understand how JavaScript is able to run multiple threads despite being a single threaded languages. That is part number 1 for JavaScript. Now question comes about React. You need to understand when React was built, what was special in React. There were other frameworks which are already present. React was built on the concept of DOM virtualization. Now the concept comes, what is DOM virtualization? Because when you make a website, your website is rendered on document object model. So what has React done in it? What virtualization actually means? What exactly piece of window that you are loading? And Muskin and Bhavya has already mentioned the service workers which are used to run multiple threads behind the scenes and many other applications which are running apart from your main app.js. What are those service workers doing and how are they able to run in parallel execution? That is where the concept of DOM virtualization come into picture. So anybody who wants to know more about it, first part is understand how JavaScript does it in multiple threads, then understand how React utilizes it. So these are two different terms. You cannot mix that since JavaScript can run it, so React is doing the same. No, it happens in entirely different format. So these two terms, event loop for JavaScript and DOM virtualization for React, that will help you understand how actually multiple threads are executed in parallel.
Yeah, Diksha, do you have anything to add to it?
No, I think so. Like all of the things, like Devang concluded, like all of the things have been much more been detailed with that, because JavaScript is the basic thing which any of the developer who is going to go with React needs to understand. And if he is able to understand like what is multi-threading and how to use those stuff into like basic thing, then it's like much more good to go. And how to use like all of the core concept like event loop and the basic thing, that's much more enough.
Okay, yeah. I think that was the last question, guys. And well, that brings us to the end of this wonderful session. I would like to thank each one of you for joining us. Hope you learned something new from today's session. We will look forward for your post along with your key takeaways. So everyone that posted the questions, and if you think that you got really amazing answers for it, please go ahead and post your key takeaways and learnings that you had from the session. And don't forget to tag Dakshit, Devang, Bhavya, Muskin, and Rekro and me on your post, and we'll be more than happy to see your learnings and key takeaways from this session. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you each and every one of you for taking your time and making this panel discussion the most engaging and the most insightful one that we had. And I would love to thank each one of you for joining us. I know that you guys are having very busy schedule, but you did take your time to just contribute something valuable for this discussion, and I'm very grateful. And even Rekro is very proud to have speakers like this in our discussions. And
Thank
before
you.
we end this, yes.
Thank you for inviting us, and I'm thankful to the audience that they took out time on a Saturday evening to attend this. So I hope we all of us were able to add value, and thanks again to Record for us to give us a chance to actually help other people out. Yeah,
audience is actually looking forward for you guys for more such panel discussions, and we'll make sure that we'll have an amazing panel like this again on a very advanced topic on front end. I think we can plan something ahead, guys. So yeah, please stay tuned with it, and we would get something interesting with amazing speakers like this today. And before I end the session, here are a few announcements that I have to make. We have created a community for developers on Rebase, on Discord called Rebase. So if you're someone with 2+ years of experience, you can get a chance to connect with experts and the fellow developers, where you can get career guidance, mentorship, and you can just like learn a lot from each other. The link is in the chat. You can go ahead and join the community. And I've attached a feedback form in the chat. So please go ahead and leave your feedback over there. We'll be looking forward for your insightful feedback. What's something that you love? What's something that you want us to take a next webinar on? And what's something that you think we can do it in a better way next time? We'll be open for the feedback, and we'll be open for your amazing interaction that you guys had in this panel discussion. And you guys can follow all the speakers today on the LinkedIn, and each and every one are actually active, from Devang, Bhavya, Dikshit, and Muskeen. And I have attached all their links in LinkedIn chat. You can go there and you can just like type their name and they'll be popped on your screen. So you can just go ahead, connect with them. And if you're having any queries, any challenges, they'll be more than happy to help you address it and then connect with you and be a mentor if they would like to help you going forward. Yes. If you're exploring career opportunities, Regro is hiring passionate developers. Check out current openings at Regro on Recro's website and go to the page called recro.io/careers. And if you're someone or looking for the opportunity, or if your colleagues or friends are looking out for change, we'll make sure that we'll place you in the great startups of the country. To stay updated with such events, follow us on social media, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, and also YouTube. And we'll be updating you with more such exciting events, and we'll get amazing panel like this with more such amazing discussions. And once again, thank you so much for sticking up till now, guys. I know it's almost been like over in 1.5 hours, but the reason why everyone was sticking because of the valuable discussions that we're having. And I can't get over the fact that audience loved it so much. Thank you once again. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Muski. Thank you, Dikshit, Bhavya, and Deva.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye.